So, Sammy, welcome to this. And what I'm going to do is to continue watching and bringing people in as we go. It's absolutely fabulous to have you here. You're one of our more prolific creators in the platform, and I love the small bite-size approach. And actually, I haven't told you this, but quite often your small introductory ones where you position the problem and then position a series of solutions is a model that I often call out to our new creators that come in. So I really appreciate the work that you do. You've got a number of talents and interests, and we were talking beforehand about your new role. And so give us a quick introduction, how you got to where you are now and what you're doing now.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, thank you for having me. I love EduSpark. I've been on the journey with you guys for a really long time now. I think it's just such a wonderful idea, and I'm just so excited to see it grow and all the new things that are coming. And having something like this is just amazing as well. This live video feature is great too. So my name is Sammy. I am from the UK. I'm currently the teaching and learning specialist at TextHelp, and that's a new role to me. I've been in that role for 6 months, but how did I get there? I was a high school maths teacher, and then I went into what we would call alternative provision maths teaching here in the UK. So children that don't fit in a school for a variety of reasons, mostly behaviour reasons. So if you can picture chairs being thrown at you, extreme violent outbursts, that's the sort of schools that I like to work in. That's where I like to be. That was my happy place. And then from there, I moved into technical education. So the plumbers, the electricians, but they still need their maths. So I really loved working with them all and helping them find the meaning of maths. And then I moved into adult education, which is just magical in a whole other way. You know, finding a 74-year-old that can all of a sudden do maths is just a brilliant feeling. So I feel like I've covered the length and breadth of the education that we've got for maths over here. And alongside that, I sort of stumbled into an edtech role, and it's a really funny story. I came back from maternity leave 7 years ago, and I walked into my work, and I said, "Here's my memory stick with my lesson." And they said, "Oh, we can't plug memory sticks in now." And I went, "Why?" And they went, "Everything's on Google." And that was it. That was a level of instruction. So I literally sat with Google thinking, they've got all my lessons. How have they got all my lessons? How does Google? And I'm like Googling, where are my lessons? I didn't realize that Google for Education had come round and all those sorts of things. So I taught myself. I bought myself I came home and cried and told my husband that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mum. And then I bought myself a Chromebook. And it was the most expensive thing to buy at the time because I'd just come off maternity leave. And I taught myself Google for education, and now I am a Google innovator, trainer, and I was the first coach outside of the USA as well for Google for Education as well. So it's been a rapid journey to get to this point. And so I ended up going freelance as an edtech consultant, which is where I came across EduSpark. And it was a place to put my courses and my materials. I'm very passionate about the digital divide. And one of the courses on EduSpark is about how you can do really cool modeling of a problem using a GIF and bridge that digital divide as well. And there's lots of data and richness in where that digital divide sits as well. So I'm really pleased that my courses sit on EduSpark, and it's a really nice place to point people to see the work that I did in colleges and schools up and down the country. And then I joined TextHelp, and TextHelp make assistive technology. And my job as the teaching and learning specialist is to really bring that point alive that is necessary for some but useful for all. And that's what I try to do is, we'll bring in this assistive technology because it's necessary for some people, but actually it's really useful for, we were just chatting before, Andrew, about if you could speak rather than type, it speeds up your workflow. Yeah, UDL, absolutely. If you can speak rather than type, then why not? It's actually really useful if you've got loads of feedback to give to students. We've seen the absolute explosion of Moat on the scene for verbal feedback. That for me is a proof that it's necessary for some to hear the feedback, but it's useful for all. And I think the more we start to understand about neurodiversity and some issues that children and young people might be facing, the more we're learning that actually let's just UDL it from the outset and have everything built in a way that we're going to feel really connected with each other as well as we go through. So just a key part before we dive in is that I still taught. It breaks my heart to say taught. I used to say teach. Up until April, I still taught. Throughout all of this, I still taught GCSE maths because I just love teaching. I was what we call a 0 hours contractor, which is minimum wage, no paid time for planning, no holiday pay. Just because I love teaching, I would tip up and teach my evening class GCSE maths every week up until April when it just got too much for me. But yeah, and I did all of that. Boo 0 hour contracts, they are here to stay though, aren't they? I did all of that online, fully online, which is unusual here in the UK, and I recognise that we're global and we've got other things, but what it really taught me is I thought I was an expert in edtech, and actually I probably needed to change my practices, so I'm going to share some of that with you today. Am I all right to dive in, Andrew?
Please go right ahead. And folks, just raise a hand. We will be stopping for chats and check-ins from time to time. Also add questions to the chat. And so we've got a few of us here monitoring and watching that as well. So away you go. This is fabulous.
Amazing. Thank you. So just really nice and simply, I don't know if you're familiar with Slido, but I'd really love it if you could just join me on a quick Slido. So you can either scan the QR code with your phone if you've got a phone to hand, or if you've got another browser tab, if you could just pop to slido.com and pop that code in. I just want to know what your favourite Christmas song is. I'm not wishing it was Christmas. I am wishing it was Christmas. It's so hot in the UK at the moment. But I would just love to know your favourite Christmas song. And I'm really sorry if you can hear children in the background.
No, we can't. There's no world war happening at all. So this is absolutely brilliant.
I've just heard, no, you can't, Spider-Man, I'm going to get you. So...
Brilliant. What we'll need is them coming in the back of the screen behind you, and that will just... This is the new work from home setup, isn't it? This is what life is. So.
It is. Amazing, brilliant, thank you. American for both selected. That's going to get stuck in my head. That's an earworm. That is going to get stuck in my head. Lee Francis is from where I live, and he drinks in the pub. When he's in Leeds, he drinks in the pub where I live, where I went to school. So, yeah. Amazing, brilliant, thank you. So we've got a nice mix there. The one by Mariah Carey, yeah. Silent Night, yeah. The Pogues, yes. We clean it up over here. We have a different version. We don't have the original version, so it gets very confusing when you sing the words and they're not actually there. A Holly Jolly Christmas, yes. Anything by Mariah Carey. Someone Loves a Diva. Jingle Bells, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for those contributions. And the reason we did that is because I'm hoping now you feel settled in the space. I've asked you to contribute and join in the space. You've had your voice heard, you've contributed, and we've built a community. You know, anything by Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey, that one by Mariah. Oh, I like Mariah Carey. And we've now found common interests where we feel settled and safe in the space. But I think safety is an important word as well. Because traditionally, we start a conversation with, hi, how are you? And I think that's a brilliant question. But sometimes we have to be prepared that that response might not be the response we want to hear. If you said, hi, how are you? And I came back with, well, I've got COVID, my mum's got COVID, my nan's got COVID and she's in hospital and I'm looking after my baby brother, which is exactly what happened to me when I was teaching online. I'm not quite prepared to deal with that response. And also the person giving that response isn't quite prepared to open up in the space. It's not the space to do that. We can find another space to do that and explore that in a more meaningful way. But here, the purpose is to learn. Where are you from? It's a great one. The purpose is to learn. So how do we settle into the space and make people feel welcome? And I personally love anything that's silly and daft. So favourite Christmas song. Easter time, what's your favourite Easter egg? What's your favourite chocolate bar? What was your favourite advert that you saw on the television this week? What was your favourite news headline of the week? What's your favourite flavour soup? Was always a really diverse one because they're like, soup, I don't eat soup. But it's one of those things where it genuinely breaks the ice. But I don't want people, close your eyes and fall into your partner, to break the ice. Is like a team building exercise that we've all done in those. That's that's too close. So we've got to find that nice line of where is it safe for us to say, how are you, but welcome you into the space without actually going, how are you? We want everyone to feel heard and connect. So this is from my student class, and this was what we did as a waterfall chat. So waterfall chat, I'm sure you're aware, is you ask the question and then you count everyone down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then everyone puts their answer in all at once. And I think that's really powerful for getting people to connect. Who's got the fastest internet speed, who's got the fastest answer, who's going to jump the gun. And there's so much fun you can have with this, bringing your personality into it. But also for some of my students who are the most vulnerable, just the power of them to be able to answer, know they've been heard, and then to sit and relax and go, okay, I'm in the space, I'm going to focus on this, and it doesn't matter what's happening right outside my door. I can just park that for a minute and I can focus on what I need to focus on. This is my time. And I think sometimes we might be guilty of, I certainly am, forgetting that for some of our students, when it is their time, the guilt that they feel to block out the other noise that's happening around them, we need to create that safety for them where we can. And one of the biggest things that threads everything, yes, would you rather are great. Would you rather have six toes on a foot or 10 fingers on a hand? Always get to them. One of the biggest things that threads through everything is collaborative learning. And I'm sure we've all heard this from Dylan William before. When you have group goals, work as a group rather than individual accountability. And I think one of the other things that we can do when we're thinking about working online, and I include this in professional development as well. So if we have a group of teachers and we're trying to professionally develop together, and we put them into groups and say, oh, you're going to go off and do this, and you're going to go off and do this, we often forget about that individual accountability. And Dylan William talks about as soon as you say to someone, you're the person that's going to present back to the group, everyone else goes, great. I am off the hook. I have no work to do. There is nothing for me to do here. As soon as you assign that note taker role, everyone else goes, great, crack on, mate. It's not that collective and individual accountability. So Dylan William talks about grading students as a collective, as a group, and as an individual. And I think that's a really important thing to hold on to. If you're going to assign group work and get people working collectively, how are you going to recognise the work of the group? But how do you recognise the work of the individual? But I would challenge you to, yes. But I would challenge you to, sorry, I'm just saying yes to pride, personal responsibility and delivering excellence. It's amazing. It's great. I would challenge you in professional learning as well. If you have a group of people that you're working with and you're assigning group work or you're putting people into breakout rooms, how are you going to measure how that collective came together and the individuals? Now, obviously, you're not grading colleagues, but you need to set that expectation that we expect everyone to be able to speak. And so we've got a strategy as we go through that might help us with that. And this is where Dylan William comes from. If everyone in the group knows they might be called on to be the reporter, they have collective responsible and individually accountable. Collective keeps coming through. Collective responsible, collective as a group that are working. And when you think about the definition of collective means working together. So what I'm doing now with you, we're not really working together. You're all settled in the space, but I'm actually holding the space and we're not collective. So how do I relinquish some of my power as the person holding the space and share that with you to build more of a collective? I've started that by settling you into the space, but I need to step that up again as we go through. And this comes down to circulating the room and checking on work. It's a difficult one because some people view it as, oh, I'm going to check on everyone's work. Not really keen on that. I am keen on circulating the room and checking everyone's okay. You might have mastered in the physical classroom. I was picked up on it once on an observation that I didn't have good aerial view. I had my back to some students. I didn't have good aerial view. And while I was working with Millie, Billy was throwing a stapler at the wall. And, that was me as a terrible teacher. And I kind of take the point, but I disagree with the point that actually my focus was on that. And, I should have managed that behaviour before it got to that point. It wasn't my positioning. But the point was about circulating the room and, do you do a figure of 8 as you go around the room? And there's so many strategies out there. But when we're teaching online, what are the strategies? How do we circulate the room? How do we check the work? How do we know what's going on? And it's a real challenge. I've done many an observation where teachers have sent students into breakout rooms and literally just sat there and gone, right, I'm just going to make a cup of tea. They'll be back in 10 minutes. And I've gone, I'm observing the class and what's happening here. And like, well, they're in their breakout rooms. They're working. And I just have this question of, how do we know what they're doing? How do we help them? What if they need us? How do they get help? What's happening? I get really panicked about it. So I would love your thoughts and your ideas then of what would you do to circulate the room digitally? So it's still on the same Slido. How would you circulate the room digitally? How would you check on students learning? Perhaps they've gone into a breakout room to do some group work, or perhaps you've set some asynchronous study that they're going to do together. How would you circulate that room digitally? Just to say as well, I'm using Slido because I can track the participants typing at the top and I can track the participants in the corner. Slido is free for 3 interactions a presentation, and it works in Google Slides and PowerPoint and doesn't need anything extra. So if you have teachers who have existing PowerPoints or existing slide decks that don't change, it might happen. It might happen. I know things should change, but some teachers do reuse and recycle and don't edit or customize for their students, but hopefully they do and personalize it a bit. But just putting a Slido in just elevates that experience a little bit because everyone is involved in that experience and it encourages that pulse check. So we've got think, pair, share, report back, cold calling, absolutely. Yeah, I love think, pair, shares. And I love that we're building community now because we're now going, I've taken your idea and I'm going to springboard off your idea. And so Slido sits really nicely for me. Drop into breakouts can disturb, it can absolutely disturb the engagement. I'm 100% with you, absolutely. And I've got strategies that don't involve dipping into the breakouts necessarily. So I think, everyone's finished typing. Oh, no, 2 are still typing. And what I love is I can see who's typing, so I know when the group is ready to move on as well. So Slido really wins for me. I know people use Mentimeter and things like that, but that takes you to another tab. I'm still in my presentation deck. I'm not coming out of that. Look at this. And because I built it as a word cloud, we can see how some of these words are now coming into the fore, so we can really focus on what we're thinking as a collective. And how can we think as a collective? And so the groups and the different are really coming to the fore. And so I really love Slido for that. So thank you for that. There's some great ideas in there. Slides, yes. Threads, yes. Communities, yes. All these, amazing. Thank you. So I'm going to just skip on for time, but thank you. So I think breakout rooms, I would agree that dipping into breakout rooms can break the engagement. A polling system can still run when you're in the breakout room. So this polling system has a Q&A feature built in. You'll see it's got a little Q&A at the bottom with a 1 on. So you could take this with you into the breakout room, and if someone needs you, they can poll into the Q&A and they don't have to leave the main room and it be obvious. Because I think when we put students into the breakout room and they leave the main room to come get leave that room to come back to the main room to get the teacher, it's obvious that they have something to say and it's obvious that they have an issue. By putting it in this way where you can ask a question, I can see, I'm not going to open this Q&A now for everybody, but I can see that somebody needs me and I can go and find and see what I need to do. So 100% with you that dipping into breakout rooms can spoil engagement. If it is safe to do so, absolutely, but give them an opportunity to still communicate with you. And version history when you're in a breakout room or in asynchronous study is just really powerful. And I think someone mentioned it as well in there. To be able to go back and see who's made the changes, who's doing the work, who's doing the typing. And I always say to my students, I don't want one person doing the typing. The beauty of this is you can all type. So I expect to see you all typing and setting those expectations. But I also do this in live comments on the work. So wherever they're working in Google Slides, in PowerPoint, whatever they're working on, or they're on a Jamboard, or they're on a Miro board, or whatever they're working on, I will go in and leave comments. So I won't go into the breakout room, but I will go look at the work and leave a live comment and say, this is great. Could you just expand on this? I would expect to see more work by now. maybe might come up as well. But, this is a real good starting point. I wonder if you could find some more research on this. One of my favourites to put on is a web link that takes them to the next task and say, guys, you're doing really great. I think you might want to look at the next task and see if it informs your answers for this task. I'm a huge fan of giving the answers ahead of time and asking students to explain why the answer is correct and where that answer came from. Pulse checks like this, and then I'll show you another pulse check as well. Digital escape rooms, yes. I love building digital escape rooms for students, and I like building them in Google Forms. A lot of what I do happens in Google Forms. So hopefully there's a few things there that came up and helps with some strategies over the coming into breakout rooms and breaking that engagement. This is a pulse check in a Google form, and I just love this. It's from 2020 because this was when the idea struck me that this would be a really good thing to do. And by this point in November, I was in my stride. I had this fairly set. So it is a Google form just with the learning intention in. And yes, each gets a frame on the Jamboard. Absolutely. Really funny. Yeah. Look through the page and type in comments. Absolutely. Really effective. Absolutely. Really great idea. Thank you. This Google form just has one question with the learning intention in. And I asked them to rate themselves. And this comes from in the classroom where I used to go, right, okay, we're ready to move on. And give me a 5 if we're ready, give me a 4, give me a 3, where are we at? And they could quickly show me where they are and ready to move on in the classroom. So if you're not going to use Slido where I could see everyone was typing, this really worked for me. Just got the learning intention in, and I just asked them to reflect. Just reflect against the learning intention. In here, you'll see the timestamp changes. So we've got 11:30 in the morning, 12 o'clock, 12:46, 18:30, 7:59, 7:58, 20 past midnight. And this is because my students were doing this outside of the classroom. By this point, I'd moved to asynchronous study for them. By this point, I'd realised that what I was doing was the teaching part was less important. My job was helping them make sense of what they were learning. And it was a real eureka moment for me as an educator. And it started to drive me into this asynchronous studies as an idea. The brilliant Alice Keeler once said to me, and she's written it in a book as well with Joe Bowler, but she said to me once, stop pretending Google doesn't exist. Stop pretending they can't watch it on YouTube. And I think we naturally fall into I'm the teacher, I'm the expert, here's the instruction, off we go. And actually, they can research and find out so much themselves. And if they can do that, then maybe they don't need to be a breakout room in class time. Maybe they can do that ahead of time and bring what they have learned to the classroom. And it's that flipped approach, however that may look, and then it brings that blended in because we've got the live as well. Here in the UK, it is very unusual for that to happen. It is still very much everything is synchronous. Here is the content. I'm the teacher. Answer some questions. Here's some feedback. Off we go. Next task. So it made me think very global, made me widen my spheres quite a lot. But this one quote interests me because it might be more reasonable. And I come back to that safety for students. If we are working with students online, we don't know what that home environment looks like. And I've heard many stories of teachers finding out what that home environment looks like when we went online and the challenges of that. But if we can make students feel safe wherever possible, asynchronous might be more reasonable. We don't know if we've got young carers. We don't know if we've got different situations. It's really challenging to find that balance. And I started at the beginning of UDL, necessary for some, useful for all. It might be necessary for some students to have some asynchronous tasks that they can do at their own time. And it might be useful for some students. And so this quote just really highlighted it. Digital equity, yeah. Insight with adult learning that previously things that you thought would only happen live. Actually, they take on a different life and a different energy sometimes when they're asynchronous. Just to say as well, that QR code and that link at the top is on every single slide, and that just takes you to a wakelet of reading, so where this quote came from, and also some other bits and bobs in a wakelet on there for you as we go through. So this is where I came up to. Being a teacher is about adding the sprinkles. And I think this is where my thinking ended up, in that my job is to add the sprinkles on top of the learning. the sprinkles that enhance that learning, that build the connections, that bring that learning out, that show where that learning could go, to show how we can extend the idea, to probe and challenge, and to bring those students on. They can actually learn a lot of it in curated materials by me, but they can actually learn a lot of it asynchronously and then bring to me or to the group their freshest thinking, we call it, and then I can add the sprinkles and help that, direct that to the next level. And I think back to my original teacher training, it was your role as the teacher is to show them and signpost them to where their learning can go next. And I think we can do that online by having so much of that work done before the lesson, asynchronously, in different activities, and then bring them into the lesson to really drive it forward. Back channels are absolutely massive. WhatsApp is a brilliant back channel for community and for working online. My students had a WhatsApp as well, and yeah, some of the stuff in there. We actually used Google Chat as well with some of the adults, and very often I'd come in, because I was only teaching the one class, I'd come in and there'd be like a request for teething remedies for a baby, and then there'd be like does anybody have the answer to question 6 straight underneath? And so their community was really thriving as they went through. And I think we come at a challenging point in that online learning sometimes has a stigma of lower quality. I keep hearing new normal. I keep hearing let's get back to normal. I keep hearing let's get back in the classroom. I know teachers who, someone said in the chat they burnt their desk. I know teachers who have, burnt their cameras. They've burnt their cameras going like, I am not going back to teaching online. I am back in the classroom. And it just, learning loss. It's not lower quality. It can be really high quality, but we're challenging a long-held perception, and it will take time to overcome that. So this is some research that I did on my students. So the students where I really nailed it, where that pulse check came from, when it sort of all clicked for me, I did some research on the class and how did they feel to be in that class. And so for context, they were given their tasks at the beginning of the week. They could do them anytime during the week. And then the following week, we would meet together and I would go through a couple of exam questions. They would ask some questions, and then we might split into breakout rooms if people wanted to work on different things. But there was no set plan to that live session. That live session could end up wherever it ended up. But they would do the bulk of their work asynchronously themselves with curated resources by me. Anything that I would have chalked and talked previously was living and breathing as a video by me. In a form, and then the form branched off. So how do you feel about this? Yes, okay, this section next. How do you feel about this? No, okay, this section next. And so it was a branching form. Go to section based on answer. It's in Google, it's branching logic in Microsoft Forms. So this is what the adult student said. And the bit for me that really stands out is because of the pandemic, I felt safer. So we come back to that safety again. And we're feeling safe because they felt safer because they were able to study online, and they felt safe because they were held by their community. And then you were supported even without a teacher. We had each other to bounce ideas around. And that's what we want, is we want students to have that community, building that community where they can bounce ideas around each other and they can all learn together. So as a teacher, we have to think about who do we want and where do we want them in the spaces. And so I've mentioned a few different things, but I think when we're creating classroom environments or professional learning environments, these are really key questions. Nobody loves an email chain, and nobody loves an email chain with 50 people in. If that could be my one thing to change in the world, that would probably be it. Because where do we know where we sit in that? Where's my voice in that? How do I contribute to this? Am I going to be the person that annoys everyone by replying to this email? I don't understand how we end up in this situation with so many emails. Yeah, choosing your adventure learning path. Absolutely. That's exactly where I was going with it. And when we create spaces, I think we do this too. We go, hey, here's a Google Classroom. Off you go, guys. And Sway's really great for that as well. And we put people in a Google Classroom, and then we don't personalize it or create spaces for it. Where am I going to be the person that posts and asks a question to the teacher that everybody's asking? I'm going to feel a bit awkward about that. I might private message my teacher instead. Oh, but there's no assignment live, so I can't send a message at the moment. I'll go into an old assignment and send a message. Well, the teacher's not going to see it. It's not going to come through. It's going to be one of those situations. So it's about thinking about those spaces. So something as simple as a Jamboard that lives at the top of the Google Classroom, or a OneNote that lives at the top of the Teams page. If you've got any questions, just pop them on here. And it's a quick check by the teacher. I'm just going to look and see if there's any questions. Now, yes, obviously there's version history and students can really go see who did it, but it almost feels a little bit anonymous. But there's nothing to stop a Slido like we're using today actually living and breathing on its own, not in a slide deck. Just living and breathing as a Slido that is, come into here and I want you to do a self-reflection on your learning and there's any questions that you're going to ask. And it's living and breathing. And it's a space where they can feel connected to you as the teacher and be able to ask those questions. Google Chat, we used a lot, and we use it professionally as well. So Google Chat, we have an all-staff Google Chat. Amazing, great. You know, with the high temperatures, it's been stay at home, stay indoors. You're welcome to come into the office and use the air conditioning sort of conversations. That's the high-level chat. Underneath that is an off-topic chat, because there has to be a space for that off-topic chat to go. So one of the challenges we then have as educators is, how do we create a space where that off-topic chat can go? Because actually we want to keep this chat specifically for learning. So how do we create a space for that off-topic chat to go? So those questions about asking which favourite Christmas song and things like that, where could they live and breathe? Could they be somewhere else? Could there be a slide deck that we all contribute together and we do an About Me slide? Where do we put that off-topic chat? If you don't create a space for that off-topic chat, it will come into your main chat. So you have to think about, what is that space going to look like? For me, for my students, they had a slide deck with an About Me if they were younger, and if they were older, we had a separate Google Chat. We had a Google Chat, this is the one Sammy is going to talk about working, and then we had another one of, this is your space, off you go. And that's how we moved like the teething chat and the toddler tantrum chat out of the work chat and into there. And they still felt connected and still felt supported. And just a little insight, these 2020 students, just as I left in April, I had left their chat space. I went back into their chat space. They're still chatting. They finished studying in 2020. They're still chatting. And so they've built that community. So think really carefully about your spaces. Things like Google Groups are really useful as well for official work chats. You know, you can set the email to be an abridged summary at the end of the day. So if it has ended up as an email of 50 people, you're just getting the summary of the 50 people's email. And then you can feel able to contribute or to not contribute or to go back to the original poster. I think we very often default to what would be the standard communication that we've done before, but we mentioned WhatsApp before. Most of the spaces that I existed in professionally as a freelancer existed in WhatsApp. You know, different WhatsApp groups for different projects we were working on, because it was groups of freelancers coming together. So if they're outside your domain, it's somewhere else to put them. So creating those spaces is really important and needs as much consideration as, what am I going to teach? It's how am I going to teach, and actually, where is this going to sit? What is this platform going to look like? Is it going to be a collaborative board, or is it going to be this? Or how am I going to create an opportunity for everyone to connect? There was some research pre-pandemic, and I'm always conscious to talk pre-pandemic because there is no learning loss. You lose your purse, you don't lose your learning. You know, I find it very challenging that you've lost your learning. Like I say, I've lost my purse, I've lost my keys, I've lost my phone. I don't think I've ever lost my learning. But anyway, semantics aside, but this research pre-pandemic is really important for me. This was about students who had spaces to communicate with their lecturers in a university in the UK. And it was about how the teacher had preloaded the information, given them all the things they needed for their course, and an opportunity to discuss and meet with the lecturer, and high quality resources. And then it compared and contrasted another faculty at the university that had less high quality resources. And it was an interesting piece, and it's on the Wakelet, which is on the link and the QR code. But it said that students were more likely to engage when they felt staff valued them, were reliable and consistent with their engagement with online work, and had effective support measures. It's one of those things that just really stands out for me. Value is knowing students. This is where, empathy, absolutely. And what is interesting about this study is that the value the students measured that value in the effort put into the resources created. And I thought that was quite powerful, in that if you're just sticking up the PowerPoint that, you've used for 9 years, how do the students feel their value in that? And so it was about the effort that the teacher had put into creating those resources and then building those spaces to create effective support measures. Those back channel chats are really, really important. And there's so many things out there, a Mentimeter, a Slido, WooClap, all the things. They're all available to us. It's just maybe thinking about using them in a different way. So the animation's not worked here. So one of the things that really stood out for me in my research as well, when I was learning, was about co-design, and co-design professionally, as professional learning, which led me to bring it into my classroom. So this is Beyond Sticky Notes, which is a fabulous resource, and this is the mindset for co-design as well. I'm just going to quickly flick back to this one, because just a couple of bits that I pulled out of this was focus on relationships, peer support and partnerships, validate people's emotions and experiences, compensate, pay and attribute co-designers' work. And you may be thinking, well, how do you take that into the classroom? Well, you can take relationships, peer support, and partnerships into the classroom nicely. You can validate people's emotions and experience nicely into the classroom. But compensate, pay, and attribute co-designers' work, well, that's about your reward structure. So what does your reward look like when your students are contributing or co-designing that learning experience with you? How do you reward that positive thinking? And the biggest thing for me is, just reaching out and being that communicator. I say there should never be any surprises between a parent and a teacher. There should never be any surprises. So that constant communication should be happening. But there's nothing nicer as a parent hearing that my child has done really well. But there's nothing nicer as a student to hear that I've done really well as well. So I think that's an important part, is when students contribute effectively to that space, even if it is just the person manning the chat who's going, Miss, there's a question in the chat, that should be rewarded, that should be acknowledged. So mindsets for co-design really informed my thinking of how I was planning my lessons. And I think these totally fit in professional co-design as well. If you are creating professional learning experiences, valuing many perspectives, understanding diverse views. I have lots of sayings. I've said lots of them already, but another one that I say is, there's a difference between saying you're open and actively bringing people in. It's not a party unless everyone's invited. And I live and breathe that. I was actually holding conversations about that really late into the night last night with a professional learning community that I have, which I'll talk to you about shortly. Learning through doing, hospitality, about taking care for others and be present in the moment. These are just values, and they're mindsets for co-design, but actually they're just values for learning. And I think these really helped inform my planning and my teaching, and think, how does this resource build curiosity, helps them learn through doing, and values their perspective? And someone's just put in the chat about the physics resources having different names and interests. Brilliant. It's amazing. That's exactly exactly where I'm going with this. So just, if you're not familiar with the Beyond Sticky Notes and the mindsets for co-design, really, it's really worth diving into, because it really informed and shaped and changed my practice. So the group that I talked about is the Joyfee Collective that I was with last night. So Joyfee is a hashtag that exists here in the UK. We also have members in Australia. It is globally. And this is one of the founders, Dr. Lou Mycroft. Bringing people together in spaces designed to make things happen are activist thinking spaces. Hashtag communities haven't really happened before. The challenge now is to reach even further across the silos. So we always start in Joyfee with a question of, how are you? So I would love it if you could just pop into the Slido and just answer, how are you? And you'll notice I didn't ask it at the start, but I'm asking it now. And then I'll explain a bit about how Joyfee lives and breathes and works. And this is what we were doing. Oh, bye, Craig. Thanks for joining. And at this point in the conversation, I'm prepared to deal with whatever response you're giving me. Hopefully you feel settled in the space and you're able to be honest, and I feel prepared that we can learn and grow together, and this would be an appropriate time to ask it. Joyfee is slightly different. So Joyfee lives and breathes as an ideas room, which is working on the principles of Nancy Klein and the thinking environment. And the principles of this are that nobody is in the space until they have spoken, which we've talked about previously, and that everyone shares the space equally. So what would happen in an ideas room is, I'm going to see if I can do it now. Alex, Andrew, Harvey, Ewan, Alex, Andrew. You'll see in a second, I'm not losing my mind, I promise. We pop everyone's name in the chat. So we would start by saying, welcome to the ideas room. We're going to share the space equally. There will be no interrupting. The only person that could be interrupted is an interrupter. I am here as the facilitator of the space, and I will hold this space. We're all going to share the space equally and take our turns to share our freshest thinking. And if anyone interrupts, I will intervene. But other than that, we'll follow the order in the chat. And so everybody takes their turn. So I would say, how are you? And then anyone could start. So Andrew would start, and then Andrew would say, over to Harvey. Harvey would say how he is, and then over to Ewan. Ewan say how they are, over to me. I would say how I am, over to Sherry. And then I would bring it back and I would say, how would you like to progress your ideas in this session? And then we go around again. Does anybody have anything that they want to bring today? And once we've gone through that, we could, as the facilitator, I would then have a list of things that have come out of what people want to discuss, and I would create breakout rooms. If you want to go discuss this with Andrew, go in this breakout room. If you want to discuss this with Harvey, go in this breakout room. And that's as simple as it is. And this is an ideas room that happens 8 p.m. UK time, whether it's BST or GMT, 8 p.m. UK time every Wednesday. And you are welcome to join us at any point. We are the Joy for Education. That's what the FE stands for, the Joy for Education. We are a collective. We have a magazine that goes out every month. You're welcome to write for the magazine. And that is about anything to do with education. We have the ideas rooms. We have writing rooms. So if you have writing that you want to do, you can come into the writing room. And what happens in there is there's a shut up and write room. There's a Pomodoro room. And there's a creative writing room, and someone just facilitates the space and you just join in. And we also run social media. You'll find us on social media. I've just come off the social media. We take it in turns. I'm not saying this to say you should join in any of this, but what I want to bring to your attention is I've never met these people. This is a fully online community. We have never met in real life. We were started at the beginning of 2020, and we have a team that run and build a magazine. We have a team that run and build the ideas rooms on a Wednesday. We have a team that run and build the writing rooms, and we have a team that run and build the social media. And I'm in some of them and not others, and that's okay too. And it's a true collective of everyone sharing the space and taking turns. But the foundation principles, how many folk are involved? So at peak, we'll get 50 people on a Wednesday evening. Last night we had 5. So it ebbs and flows. The magazine has a readership of thousands a month. Yeah, Web3. I think we're safe in the way that it's constructed at the moment. But yes, I can see that Web3 would change that dynamic slightly. But this exists in a WhatsApp back channel chat as well. So the actual running in the organisation of the collective happens in a WhatsApp as a back channel, and there are lots of, if I showed you my WhatsApp, there are like the magazine group, the reading room group, the writing room group. Oh, there's a reading group as well. They read books. We've got everything, but we've collectively come together, and we've been organised in how we do that. And so the ideas room in taking turns is about role, rank and ego left at the door. And it's about how you don't come in and go, hi, I'm Sammy, and this is my job title. You come in and you go, hi, I'm Sammy, and I would like to think about this today. And it was a long time before I realised that someone that came to the Thinking Ideas rooms was a principal at the local college where I used to work. Because you just leave that role, rank and ego at the door. It's just beautiful. Order of names in the chat. Opening questions of practice of care, how are you? And it is prepared to deal with those responses. And we set that expectation that if you are not okay, it's okay to say you're not okay. There's no judgment from everyone. There's a confidentiality that goes there, and there's no interruptions. And there's just an order of the chat there of when we ran an ideas room in the afternoon. But I think there's something in this to take into your lessons. And I did. And I took this into my live lessons. So when I say about being a teacher is about adding the sprinkles, this was the sprinkles I was putting on top. And that students would then know when it was their turn to speak. So if I had a question that I was going, right, I'm looking for an answer on this one, it would go, I would say, right, Harvey, have you got an answer? And Harvey could say, no. Over to Ewan. Ewan would go, well, I would try it this way. Over to Sammy. Oh, okay, I would try this way. Over to Sherry. Yeah, I would try this way, but I think it might be this. Over to Vale. And that's how it naturally flowed. By putting the names in order in the chat, you know when it's your time to speak. You know when it's your turn. You're not going to be interrupted. You can talk for as long as you want. Obviously, you have to respect the space and respect the rights of others and not dominate the space. But nobody ever talks for too long, because you talk for as long as you need to talk to get your ideas out. And the thinking behind this from the work of Nancy Klein is that thought in the back of your head won't come out unless you feel safe in the space and feel like you have the time to do that. So just a little insight into how really building community online really can drive forward that practice of care. And I'll just finish on the quote from Dr. Lou Mycroft, one of the founders of Joyfee. She wrote a thesis on community and communities of education. Educators do still just have influence in how they teach, and there's a rising tide of interest in pro-social community and trust-building pedagogies of care. I'll take any questions.
Over to the group. Please feel free to come off mute and ask any questions that are in your mind. I've got a few if lined up already if nobody else has. Go for it, Michael.
No, I guess that last slide was kind of where I was going with Indigenous kind of perspectives in curriculum as well, because since probably the early 1980s, New Zealand's tended to take a more bicultural approach to its education system. So we're trying to incorporate more Mātauranga Māori into the curriculum, and a lot of the points you were making, developing an online community, are very similar to the principles of Te Ao Māori. So the idea of manaakitanga, which is about hospitality, being hospitable to people in the environment, whakawhanaungatanga, which is the idea of developing those relationships, the idea of manamunda hake, so empowering the learners to become independent by prompting them with skills. These are all definitely at the fore of the Indigenous worldview we have in New Zealand through our Indigenous people, the Maori. So it's very interesting seeing those parallels. I'm not sure that's a question, more just a rambling statement.
No, it was a wonderful contribution, and that's the beauty of the spaces that you were able to open and share. And yeah, thank you.
Alex, did you have something to add? Looks like you were off mute there for a second.
I don't really have any questions. I've just, being sort of reinvigorated with some of these ideas, and just got a bunch of notes. I had a really tiny technical question about actually when you pop the names in the chat, the list, did you say that you could start with whoever's ready and then kind of go through with the circle? So like if you skipped me at the start, I'd be able to, it would circle back to me at the end. Was that how you?
That's absolutely. It just goes in. It goes in an order. Anyone can start, and you can pass. Yeah. What we say is you can pass, and that's totally fine to pass. There's no judgment. You can pass, but we don't come back to you. It's not a power play where you go and pass. I'll wait and see what everyone else says, and I'll just summarise what everyone says at the end, because we know that can happen. So if you pass, that's fine. We just carry on. We just don't come back to you.
That's actually awesome. I like that circle time approach in the classroom, but in the digital space. which, I'd forgotten about circle time because we haven't been in school for so long. Anyway, thank you.
I love the work of Chad Littlefield. I don't know if you know much of his stuff. If you look him up on YouTube, he's got a whole stack of ways in which he doesn't even like the term icebreaker, to be honest, these warm-ups where you warm people into the space. Ones that reduce the cognitive load and increase the safety, such as complete the sentence. So someone doesn't have to get the brain working to the point where they've got to create the whole thing. Finish this sentence. Today I'm feeling like, and then ... And then it just allows people to access and sort of focus their thinking on the things that might be more helpful. But I'm just resonating with so many things, and I could listen to you all day, Sammy. This whole sense, the discoveries from me over the last 12 months in doing this whole EduSpark thing has been quite amazing from my own personal understanding point of view. And it's relationships that drive learning, and it's community that fosters relationships. And the two dimensions of relationships, I think, in fact, there were three. North is to the leader of the learning, the facilitator. East and west are the peer-based engagements. And south, you could say, is the relationship with yourself as you're engaged with this learning. And if you can construct that as the wraparound around content, doing stuff and talking about it as the sort of central flow, all contained within an environment that is supported through relationship, I think that probably gets pretty close to where the best learning tends to happen. So that's a sort of a brief summary of what I've been seeing in talking to many people like yourself. And
totally agree with that. That's a brilliant analogy.
Yeah. One of the challenge, and I know the answer to this, and you might take this as, and it's definitely not an observation of today, but one of the other things that I'm starting to advise people through and trying to bring into my own community, I've got a community of 7 aspiring leaders, and just that it's a very intimate group, and then I've got others that I belong to that are much bigger, and that's where I started to understand this. And the mechanisms that started to drive that were not only content delivery, not only live sessions that are much more about meaning making than direct teaching, but actually small group and one-to-one coaching. And what I realized is that you've got to almost measure how much the leader of learning is speaking compared to the learner speaking. And learners only learn when they've had the chance to speak or write or say, because the power of communication as a mechanism for making sense of the world is so important. And yet when we're in delivery, and it's very natural that you're in a delivery space there, that just means that we have to make the opportunity for learning to be longer, not a one and done, and that we want to pull people through into engagement in community and courses and a connection through those moments. So I'm starting to see my work in the past as being too heavily dominated by me speaking all the time, says he who's speaking a lot right now.
But this is the thing, I've told you before about the sheep dip approach. We very often dip people in learning and go, oh, will that stick? No, okay, we'll dip you in the next one. Oh, will that stick? No, dip you in the next one. And I might be the facilitator that carries you as the sheep around and dips you in all the sheep dip. But actually, what if I built you a special sheep dip that would definitely stick for you? And that is my job. I can dip you in the others just quickly to see, but actually once I find that actually me not talking is probably the best, and you probably going out and working out a few things for yourself is probably the best, and then come back to me and I'll just pretty it up at the end. It's like when you give stuff to a graphic designer, you're like, here's my idea, go make it pretty. I see learning as that now. The students are, here's what I've learned, make it pretty for me, Sammy. And I'm like, okay, this is where we're going to go with this is what we're going to do with this, and this is what we're going to do this.
And it's through that process that you actually make the engagement personalisable. Yong Zhao doesn't talk about personalised learning; he talks about it being able to be personalised by individuals. So, yeah, very interesting.
What comes first, thinking or learning? The chicken. It's great.
Still processing that last statement too. Learning to think is the challenge. I'm just thinking about that. Oh.
Very good.
Amazing.
I'm just checking to see if Sherry or Ewan have any questions to say. Sherry, I don't know if you really are in Mississippi directly right now, which would place you at a very unfriendly time of the day to be engaging in this conversation. So all props to you if in fact you are physically in Mississippi as well as being from Mississippi. Ewan, welcome. What are your thoughts? Love you.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for that. No, I've really enjoyed the presentation, Sammy. It's got me thinking a lot. Particularly, I'm working on at the moment a professional learning network for teachers mainly in China. And I don't have a question per se, but you really got me thinking around a couple of key issues that I've been trying to address. Number one is like the platforms to use. So we can't require people to use a VPN, and therefore we can't actually use a lot of the amazing tools that are coming out of Silicon Valley and other parts of the world. But, I think that what you were saying around the importance of having channels where like there's the social element to the community, but also like, how do we organize the thinking within the group by having different groups? That's one of the challenges I'm grappling with. And, I could put it out there. I mean, if anyone's aware of any tools that operate in China without a VPN that offer that functionality. At the moment, I've got Edmodo, which is great as one discussion feed, but it doesn't offer that division of discussions into themes within one class. So any creative ideas that people have for doing that would be greatly appreciated. But if not, that's just me sharing back my thoughts.
Sammy, you're a real collector of edtech, and I've learned lots from you over the last 12 months in particular. Have you got any thoughts on that one?
I think China is a very different animal and a very different beast, but my initial thoughts would be have a document for the, like I said, the about me or the, the social things like that, that is a task that they can go to and keep the Edmodo chat as the actual chat for work and for learning and for building those connections. I don't think Padlet works in China.
I mean, a lot of the Microsoft tools still work in China. They're very anti-Google because of
but like a slide deck, a PowerPoint deck of like topics of we at the beginning of lockdown we started a slide deck, and it was tell us about your favorite breakfast on the first slide, and then tell us about and then eventually they took it over and they were like, I want to ask a question. And these were teachers, these weren't students, these were our teachers. I had 1,000 teachers under me when we started lockdown, and 10,000 students, and a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. Fun times, guys, fun times. I was the edtech person. Yeah, I was the edtech person that had to find all these tools and strategies, and that's why I collect them, Andrew. Is that it was necessary. It was necessary. But I think a decent, solid slide deck, Ewan, to create that social space. I mean, I don't know how far you want to go, but I also wrote an ebook of party games that you can play on video calls. Some are mega, some are small. This was my Google Innovator project. I love dot storming, Andrew. You're doing to be there. Dot storming is a great board. I love dot storming because you can embed it as an iframe, which is what's on my EduSpark courses. So you can put that in something else, and it sometimes goes in a lot nicer. And dot storming has GIFs in. So someone said about just leaving an emoji, just leaving a GIF of how you're feeling today, or leaving a GIF of what you got out of the session, just changes that engagement up and makes it a bit less onerous. But yeah, there's on the Wakelet, I'm sure it's on there, is the ebook of party games as well. That's had, I could be wrong, over 10,000 views around the world, and it's used by teachers. It's used by teachers with students. It's used by professional learning. Like if we were doing it now, the first one would be, I want the 6 of you to make the rainbow. So decide amongst yourselves who's going to go get what colour, and go get something of that colour and bring it back to me. Do you know what I mean? And it's just something as simple as that, and it just changes the speed and the tempo a bit.
Right, I'll check those out.
I'm very mindful of your time, and it's going to be it is the start of the day, and we haven't had World War 71 behind you with your...
No, they've gone downstairs for breakfast, so I can't hear them.
So with that, pardon me, with that, just I could listen to you all day, and I really look forward to continuing to talk more. And Sammy's prolific in EdgeSpark. She's got some fabulous short bite and some longer version courses as well. And Sammy, I'd like to talk to you more about when we release our community function. If you can, maybe you and I have a look at that together, and you start to get a sense of whether we're getting the right functional stacks there for people to be able to use. But thank you so much for your time. Early start for you. Please survive that hot weather well and stay cool. And thank you all for joining. And I'm recording this. I'm going to place this into the course that we're holding this as well. So thank you all, and stay well and stay happy. Thank you, Sammy, in particular.
Thanks everyone. Thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for your feedback, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks so much.